Welcome to our channel. We're so glad to have you here with us today. If you're new, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on tomorrow's incredible Royal Guard story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Before we dive into today's story, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let us know your city or country. It's always exciting to see how far our community stretches. So sit back, relax, and get ready for an unforgettable journey. Let's jump into today's story. What happened when a royal guard challenged a judge in court? Lieutenant David Carter, a proud member of the British Royal Guard, walked down the bustling streets of London, his scarlet uniform standing out against the backdrop of the city's historical buildings. His polished boots clicked rhythmically on the pavement, a sound that mirrored his disciplined thoughts. As he approached Buckingham Palace, the weight of his ceremonial uniform didn't feel heavy at all. After all, he had worn it countless times during his 7 years of service, each time with a deep sense of honor and responsibility. Today, though, was different. He wasn't headed to his post at the palace gates or standing guard outside the royal residence. No, today he was merely an observer, something he rarely had the chance to be. Buckingham Palace, with its grandeur and history, had always fascinated Carter. As he paused to admire the magnificent building, he thought back to his childhood when he dreamt of becoming a lawyer, just like his father. But life had led him down a different path, one that led to military service with the Royal Guard, an opportunity to serve his country in a way that combined discipline, honor, and tradition. He checked his watch, noting that he still had 90 minutes before his next duty. The public hearing in progress piqued his interest, something about a property dispute. It wasn't just curiosity that drew him to the courtroom. It was his deep respect for the legal system. Before joining the Army, Carter had spent countless hours reading legal texts, staying updated on landmark cases, and even attending law school in his spare time. He had always believed that both law and military service served a common purpose: upholding justice, protecting order, and ensuring the rights of every citizen. As Carter climbed the steps of the courthouse, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This building was more than just a place for legal battles. It was a symbol of the strength and resilience of British society. He entered the grand oak doors of the courtroom, slipping inside with military precision. His uniform, however, immediately caught the attention of everyone in the room. Heads turned, whispers spread, and suddenly, all eyes were on him. And that's when things took an unexpected turn. Judge Richard Blackwell, a man known for his sharp intellect and commanding presence, noticed the disruption and halted the proceedings. What happened next left everyone in stunned silence. As Lieutenant David Carter stood in the back of the courtroom, he couldn't help but feel the tension in the air. He had slipped in quietly, not intending to disrupt anything. But the bright scarlet of his uniform, the unmistakable gleam of the brass buttons, drew eyes like a magnet. At first, he thought nothing of it. He was just here to observe, a civilian like anyone else, interested in the law and how it worked in practice. The courthouse, after all, wasn't just a place for legal battles. It was a symbol of justice, a reflection of the system he deeply respected. But then, something unexpected happened. Judge Richard Blackwell, presiding over the property dispute, stopped mid-sentence. His eyes flicked toward Carter in the back row. The room grew quiet, the only sound being the faint rustle of papers and the subtle shifting of chairs. The judge's gaze was sharp, disapproving. It didn't take long for Carter to realize that Blackwell was not impressed by his presence. "Is there something distracting about this courtroom?" Blackwell's voice echoed across the room, his words cutting through the silence with deliberate precision. His eyes were fixed on Carter now, sizing him up like a piece of meat. The tone in his voice, dripping with contempt, made it clear he wasn't just addressing the entire room. He was pointing the finger at Carter. A few uncomfortable glances passed between the lawyers in the room. Some shifted in their seats, uncomfortably aware of the tension building. Carter, however, remained motionless, standing at attention, his posture perfect. This wasn't the first time someone had misjudged him, but this situation was different. "Why has a costumed performer decided to disrupt my courtroom in the middle of proceedings?" Judge Blackwell sneered, clearly irritated. His words stung like a slap in the face. For a moment, Carter stood still, processing the judge's hostility, the insult veiled in his words. He wasn't sure whether it was the public nature of the court or the judge's frustration with the interruption, but it was clear that Blackwell wasn't just questioning his attire. He was questioning his purpose in being there. With military precision, Carter straightened and responded in a calm, respectful voice. Your Honor, I am Lieutenant David Carter of the British Royal Guard. I am attending as an interested citizen during my off-duty hours. The room fell into a stunned silence. What happened next would shake the very foundation of this courtroom. As Judge Richard Blackwell stood at his bench, his expression hardened, clearly taken aback by Lieutenant David Carter's calm, measured response. The room, once filled with the hum of legal proceedings, now buzzed with a palpable tension. Carter had just revealed that he wasn't some tourist or performer, but a highly trained military officer, one who happened to be a lawyer as well. The judge's earlier arrogance quickly shifted to discomfort, but Blackwell wasn't about to back down so easily. He cleared his throat and attempted to regain control of the courtroom, his voice sharp and deliberate. You claim to be a lawyer, Lieutenant, Blackwell began, his tone dripping with skepticism. But I fail to see how a man dressed in full military uniform has any place in this courtroom. You've disrupted these proceedings and should be held accountable. The courtroom fell silent once again, all eyes on Carter. This was the moment. Carter stood tall, unshaken, his military bearing unmistakable, yet there was something more to him than just his uniform. With a quiet sigh, he stepped forward, his voice clear and precise as he addressed the judge. Your Honor, I understand your concerns, Carter said, but with all due respect, there is no legal basis for the fine you've imposed. In fact, the laws governing public court access explicitly permit military personnel in uniform to observe proceedings during their off-duty hours. Section 4 of the Court Access Act of 1981, which I'm sure you're familiar with, ensures that no citizen, regardless of their profession or attire, can be barred from attending a public court session. The judge's eyes narrowed. Carter had caught him off guard, but Blackwell wasn't about to let it show. So, you expect me to believe that your military uniform is legally protected? He scoffed, clearly not willing to accept the truth just yet. With a quiet confidence, Carter continued. Yes, Your Honor, and that's not all. There are no restrictions against wearing military attire in a courtroom. In fact, your citation of Section 42 of Courtroom Procedural Standards is entirely inaccurate. It doesn't even exist. You're relying on non-existent regulations to justify your actions. The judge's face turned red as he fumbled for a response, but Carter wasn't finished. Your Honor, I spent years at Harvard Law School before joining the British Royal Guard. I've worked with legal firms specializing in administrative law, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in legal history at King's College London. I am not some costumed performer. I am here because I care about justice, and I am deeply troubled by how this court is being misled. The courtroom was silent. The tension in the room was thick, the balance of power now hanging in the air. Carter's knowledge, his composure, his calm delivery, all of it spoke louder than any uniform ever could. The judge, once so confident in his authority, now seemed uncertain, the weight of his earlier mistake sinking in. What happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. Judge Richard Blackwell shifted in his seat, his fingers nervously tapping the bench as Lieutenant David Carter's words sank in. The courtroom was unnervingly still, the air thick with anticipation. Carter's calm, methodical delivery had rattled the judge, stripping away the layers of authority Blackwell had so carefully constructed over his career. For the first time in 27 years on the bench, the judge found himself questioning not just the uniform of the man before him, but his own actions. Carter's words hung in the air like a challenge. There is no Section 42, he had said, his voice firm but respectful. No Section 38 either. You've relied on non-existent regulations to impose a fine, Your Honor. And that is not just a mistake. It's a violation of the very principles of law this court is supposed to uphold. The judge's face had turned a shade of crimson, and he gripped the edge of the bench tightly, as if trying to steady himself. Carter had thrown down the legal gauntlet, and Blackwell knew he couldn't simply ignore it. His earlier defiance now felt like a weak bluff, and that the courtroom could feel the shift in power. Lieutenant Carter, I wasn't aware of those details, Blackwell stammered, the edge gone from his voice. He had spent decades cultivating his reputation for sharp intellect and even sharper authority. But now, in front of this quiet, composed man who had just dismantled his arguments with ease, the judge found himself at a loss. For a moment, he wasn't sure how to regain control of the room. The silence grew heavier, and Carter stood, unyielding, his posture impeccable. "I'm here to observe and learn, Your Honor," he said calmly. "But I won't stand by when the law is being misused. What I've said is true, and I'm sure your legal counsel will confirm that." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even an accusation. It was a simple statement of fact. Carter wasn't challenging the court's authority. He was challenging the abuse of it. His composed demeanor and unwavering conviction made it impossible for anyone in the room to ignore the truth of his words. Blackwell cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of authority, but his voice lacked its previous strength. "Very well," he muttered, his tone now surprisingly humble. "In light of this information, the fine will be reconsidered." As Carter stood there, waiting for the final decision, the judge's struggle was evident. The courtroom had gone from tense silence to quiet disbelief. Blackwell had misjudged the situation in every possible way, and now he had no choice but to backpedal. It wasn't just a legal victory for Carter, it was a moment that would forever change the way the courtroom viewed him. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Richard Blackwell hesitated, clearly wrestling with his pride. The once imposing figure, known for his unshakable authority, now appeared small in the face of Lieutenant David Carter's calm, unyielding conviction. The judge's earlier dismissal of Carter, branding him as a mere costumed performer, seemed like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the legal precision Carter had wielded in his defense. Carter stood motionless, his posture impeccable, awaiting the judge's final decision. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the room, and it was clear that this was no ordinary legal exchange. Carter hadn't just won a legal argument. He had dismantled Blackwell's arrogance, exposed the flaws in his reasoning, and forced the judge into a rare position of humility. The room was still, each person present fully aware of what had just transpired. "I apologize," Judge Blackwell finally said, his voice stiff and strained. "The fine will be rescinded." He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "And I acknowledge that my previous comments were inappropriate." Carter's response was nothing short of dignified. With a simple nod, he accepted the apology, the weight of the situation not lost on him. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said respectfully. But there was something more in his words, something deeper than mere politeness. It wasn't just a victory for Carter. It was a reminder to everyone present of the importance of respect for both the law and those who serve it. As the courtroom settled back into a tense quiet, Carter turned to leave, his military precision cutting through the stillness. Just before he reached the door, he stopped and turned back to face the judge. "One more thing, Your Honor," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "A formal correction to the record would be appropriate, given the nature of the exchange." Blackwell, who had once stood tall with arrogance, now seemed deflated, but he couldn't dismiss the truth that Carter had spoken. "Very well," the judge muttered, begrudgingly accepting the request. As Carter left the courtroom, the air felt different. He hadn't just fought for his dignity. He had stood for the law and the values it was meant to uphold. The courtroom's atmosphere had shifted from discomfort to quiet respect. Carter had proven that true strength doesn't come from a title or a uniform, but from the quiet confidence that comes from knowledge, integrity, and a deep commitment to justice. And as he stepped into the hallway, the elderly barrister who had watched the entire exchange gave him a respectful nod, a small but significant recognition of the quiet victory Carter had won that day. "We'd love to hear from you. What did you think of Lieutenant David Carter's unexpected courtroom battle? It's not every day you see a military officer step into a legal drama like this, and it's even rarer to see a judge's authority challenged so skillfully. We want to know your thoughts. Do you think Judge Blackwell went too far with his assumptions? Or did Lieutenant Carter handle the situation with the perfect mix of dignity and intelligence? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to stand up for what's right, even when the odds were stacked against you? Or maybe you've witnessed someone handle unfair treatment with grace and knowledge like Carter did in this story? Share your experiences with us. We love reading your stories, and you never know, your comment could inspire someone else going through something similar. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories like this. There's always something new and exciting coming your way. Leave us a comment, tell us where you're watching from, and join the conversation. We can't wait to hear from you.